Well, let's return now to the Manchester terror attack. Here was the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer's response.
To every Jewish person in this country, I also want to say this. I know how much fear you will be holding inside of you. I really do. I express my solidarity, but also my sadness that you still have to live with these fears. Nobody should have to do that.
Joining me now is Reform UK Councillor for County Durham, Darren Grimes. Darren, thank you so much for joining me. Look, you know, your Prime Minister just recognised Palestine. He's demonised Israel for the past 2 years and has shown incredibly weak leadership. And now he claims he knows how much fear Jews in the UK must have. What do you make of his response to this attack?
Well, I think, Danica, that actually those words run about as hollow as his skull does, right? This is a man who has spent the last 2 years totally demonising Israel to try and appease his backbenchers, who are like a baying mob towards the Jews in Israel, and of course to his party membership, which are somewhere to the left of, I don't know, the politics of Jeremy Corbyn. So recognising Palestine, actually, in my view, was saying to the terrorists that actually they got what they want. They basically are having October 7's actions endorsed and appeasing the very movement that actually fuel the hatred of Jews that culminates in the attack on the synagogue yesterday. He tells the Jewish community here that he knows their fear, but actually, Danica, I would argue that it's his weakness that has helped exacerbate and ferment that fear. I'm 32 years old, I'm not Jewish, but I feel, Danica, like I've watched my country be dismantled and replaced with something utterly foreign. You know, Jewish schools and synagogues in Britain now need permanent security as if we're in a war zone and not the state of Israel. It isn't leadership, it's a total and utter cultural surrender, and it sickens me to the very core of my being.
Look, you're not wrong, and I'm afraid it's happening over here in Australia too, Darren. And look, I've got to show you this because hours after the attack, pro-Palestine protesters descended on Whitehall. Darren, they think that Greta and her merry band of followers are the real victims on a day that Jews are slaughtered in their place of worship.
Yeah, exactly. You put it very well there. I mean, look, it's the double standards, right? We're told that the so-called far right are the big threat. You know, Apple TV, I note, in their big drama Slow Horses, have a far right threat, shooting to death a poor Muslim mayor. I mean, this is just all, it's grotesque, the distortion of reality within the position that we're in the West. You know, more than 2,000 arrests have come from Gaza-based protests. But if a far-right thug, right, Danica, had stormed a Manchester mosque and slaughtered the worshippers, God forbid, do you really think the police would be green-lighting marches from those kinds of activists on the very same day? There ain't a chance. There's not a cat and chance hell, because it's Labour's chosen mobs, right? They get a free pass because of the cause of which they are standing. And I find it utterly morally reprehensible. It's an act of political cowardice. And the Labour mayors in both Manchester, Andy Burnham, and Sadiq Khan in London, I think have shown themselves for the weak, tiny little men that they are. Shame on them, Danica, because it shames Britain, not just here, but on the international stage too.
Yeah, look, you're spot on. Now, look, before we let you go, Reform UK leader Nigel Farage has taken a swipe at our Prime Minister Anthony Albanese after he failed to meet him on his recent tour of the UK. Now, you recall that Albo addressed the UK Labor Party conference last week where he accused Reform of dividing people, Darren. Nigel Farage says that Anthony Albanese has failed to recognise the current shift in political sentiment across the West. He's not wrong, is he?
Oh, absolutely not. Nigel's absolutely spot on. You know, leaders like Albanese, Starmer, Trudeau, Biden, you know, I just want to break out in a sort of rendition of YMCA, you know, because it's that sort of progressive politics. They all sing from the same hymn sheet, Danica. They sneer at so-called populism. They accuse us of dividing people, which is incredibly hypocritical given the kinds of things that they parrot on a daily basis, but they refuse to actually face the truth. And the truth is very simple. Ordinary men and ordinary women across the West, they're sick of mass migration, they're sick of the threat to themselves and their children, they're sick of the green zealotry making their lives colder and poorer, they're sick of being told that their own culture and the generations of their ancestors who've fought and fermented said culture are utterly worthless. The political weather, it's shifting very, very fast indeed, but the left are stuck in their university seminar rooms and they just simply do not get it. They're about to be swallowed up by it, though. And we don't want the scenes, Danica. I would just finish with this. The scenes like those a couple of years back calling for horrific acts against Jews outside of the Sydney Opera House. We don't want to see terror attacks on the streets and synagogues of Britain. And I suggest that we use arrogant Albanese and his progressive prats as fuel for our fight. You know, our version of patriotism, our version of national renewal. We'll have to be bold. We'll have to be unashamed. We've got to be actually rooted in a belief in who we are, our history, and confident in our self-defense, because this isn't someone else's war. This isn't just Israel's war, Danica. This is our war taking place on the streets of Australia and the United Kingdom.
Absolutely spot on. And Israel is fighting terror for the West, not just fighting for their own survival, for all of us. And what a shame and what a blight on leaders like Anthony Albanese and Keir Starmer that they are so blind to see what's going on. Darren Grimes, great to see you. Thank you very much for joining me on the show this evening.
Always a pleasure, Danica. Thank you.